Well, welcome to Unite to Study, the 7 Gates of Righteous Knowledge, and we're up to class number 11, and we're on to the 5th gate tonight, and hopefully we'll get through chapters 1, 2 and 3, and they are in relation to the gate of personal traits that God desires from us. So that's the theme of tonight. And the definition of behaving as a wise person or a pious person, and according to Ecclesiastes, it says, a lover of money will never be satisfied with money. A lover of abundance has no wheat. This too is futility. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 9. And the commentary to that says that money will never still a rich man's hunger, for who can eat money? So that kind of gives us a little bit of an interlude into what's going to transpire tonight. So I just thought it was prudent to do a bit of an overview of the session of class number 11 or session number 11. So what we're going to look at is we're going to define piety, and we're going to look at healing the soul of unhealthy traits and also guarding ourselves from sin, so going a bit beyond the actual law. And then we'll look at the individual character traits and behaviours that are as individual as we are ourselves. And characters and behaviours that are extreme, they can be moderate or they can be middle of the road, the other extreme. So you can have extreme, minimal, or the desired approach would be that in between, in the middle path, that moderation. So, and we all have different personalities and different character traits, and a lot depends on how we come by that. So as an individual, we can be born with certain traits, just as our physicality is. We can look like our parents, and we can have certain familial tendencies and behaviours even. I know myself, my youngest grandson is 12, and every time I look at him, I see my father. And yet they were never known to each other. So that would be his great grandfather, but his mannerisms and how he answers and, you know, expressions on his face. And I think, oh, the DNA is all there, flowed through. So, you know, we can inherit some of those things, and only God knows that. So some character traits and behaviours are naturally present in people. You'll hear people say, oh, that child's an old soul, or, you know, I'm going to have trouble with this kid. You hear all these sort of expressions. And some, they're acquired or learned by association, and we'll talk more about that in a while. And the important thing, I guess, for us to understand is that either extreme of those two of the scale is really not desirable. So we're aiming to be on that middle path in most instances. The middle path is we're in a reasonably good position. So I just wanted to mention about, there's going to be a slight difference when we come to anger and arrogance. That comes on a little bit down the track a little bit further. But an example would be, you know, when people are constantly angry and hot-headed, and, you know, they fly off the handle at anything, then we've got to look at how, if we have that trait, we have to look at how we can temper that, how we can have it in a moderate, manageable, controlled area. And you'll get people who have excessive pride or greed, or some people can be a miser, some people can be a spendthrift. So it's not good to be either. You've got to be in the middle, in a refined and satisfactory area of character and behaviour. So, go on to this next one here. So how do we moderate character and behaviour? Well, without doing a full lesson on psychology and psychiatry, which I'm not qualified to do, but all the learned writings and hints in the scripture, etc., tell us that we need to be self-analysing and examining ourselves. So we need to be perhaps reflecting. They say we should, at the end of each day, we should reflect on our day. Was it pleasing? Was there anything I regretted? Should I have done it better? Could I, if that happens again, I'll handle it in a better way, and so on. And so it's that examining and analysing our handling of the situation, our character and behaviour. And then, if we feel we have got a character trait or a behaviour that's bothersome, then we need to look at this and drill down into it and say, well, what influences that extreme anger with me, or that extreme depression, or the extreme laziness sometimes? What is it influences that? Is there an environment that surrounds those extremes? Are there external factors that come into play? Is something pushing your buttons, so to speak? And then also look at what triggers the extremes. Is it something that only happens at work, or is it certain people or family or neighbours? There's a whole host of things that this can be, and that is only able to be known and detected by us personally. And the other thing I think that is important is to look at whether there's a recognisable pattern or a regularity to these extremes. Do we swing from one extreme to the other and only stay in the middle path at a certain amount of time, and something happens? Like some people have extreme changes when it comes to things like, dare I say it, but Christian celebrations like Christmas and things like that. As a nurse, I can tell you, Christmas and New Year, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, you got all the attempted suicides in because they were, family matters, etc. And on New Year's Day, you got everyone in with supposed food poisoning. They'd eaten too much roast pork or something like that. So that was a pattern that was pretty much set your clock by. Anyway, so sometimes, the calendar, the cycles of what's going on in the calendar can affect people. And I guess the other thing that we need to sort of note in this situation is, are the extreme ends more frequent than that moderate path? That's a real concern when you're at either end, but not very often in that middle path. And there's a host of reasons why that can happen as well that I won't go into tonight. And the other thing is, we as humans tend to voluntarily enslave ourselves to certain things. It can be fanatical about house cleaning. It can be, I don't know, a passion for buying shoes you're never going to wear. Or is it your career? Are you deeply steeped in that and not much other time for anything else? Can it be money? Can it be ego? It can be any number of things. And again, only the individual can sort of nail that, I guess, and understand what it is. But it is true, when you sit down and you look at patterns, it's easy then to identify maybe what caused that. Is it happening at a certain time of the year? Is it happening when you're with certain people or certain occasions in your life, etc.? So, but generally speaking, and as an individual, our temperament is generally speaking on the moderate path, but we all will have those times of extremes, and having it occasionally is not a problem. It's when you're on that extreme ends of the scale that all the time that it is a bit of a problem. And we have to, we're not sort of when we're drifting from one extreme to the other, we're not in an ideal position to be giving service to Hashem. And apart from that, it's not good for us, not good for the inner soul and the spirit, and certainly not good for you physically either. So we have to be aware of those things and try and sort them out. Now, just we do have an obligation. I might just go to this next one. Here we go. We might just use the example of anger because it's one that's sort of easy to describe and most of us can relate to in some way or another. But we have a obligation to Hashem to keep our body and our spirit as healthy as possible. So we are obligated to do that in order that we can submit to his service in an appropriate and effective manner, really. So, but we'll use anger as an example because that's often the most difficult one that people find to deal with. So obviously we have guidelines, and that's, don't be easily provoked. Don't be hot-headed at the slightest provocation. We've all known someone that this happens to. As soon as the wind changes direction, they're upset about something. They're constantly angry about something. But on the other end of the scale, we're not to be numb and callous and insensitive and just like a robot and just everything doesn't affect you. I mean, that's not a healthy attitude either. So again, we come back to having a moderate approach, and here is where we divert a little bit, because if someone is constantly angry, then they've really got to switch to the minimal end of the scale and actually go beyond being moderate and try actually being a bit desensitizing yourself to situations, so it's a bit like overcorrecting and then come back to the middle road. But there are also times, we are told, that we are, I don't like to use the word justified, but there are instances in life where we are angered by something for the right reasons. And how we handle that is very much to do with how we handle anger in other situations as well. Some people handle it very well and others don't. And that's, you come across that in the workforce and everywhere. So when we do have a degree of anger, the idea is to moderate it and approach it with a very limited and controlled attitude. And it may be an example, somebody does something really, really stupid at work that they should know better, and it's been a chain reaction. I mean, you are justified if you're the line manager or the supervisor or whatever to feel anger about it. That is a fairly natural response. But when you're in that situation where it's serious and intervention is certainly justified, you've got to correct it. And also you've got to intervene and express your disappointment and this is a difficult, angry thing that's happened in order to prevent that escalating or becoming a reoccurring event. So it's really important to certainly express your concern, and it's okay to say you're angry at that this happened, this should never have happened. There are, plans in place, guidelines in place, etc. And, I want to know why this happened, So at times we do have to do that, to show our angry side in a controlled way, though. But the important thing to do is not don't confuse the situation. Your idea is to diffuse it. So you've really got to get to a point where you can lower your voice volume, be very calm, even with your body actions, and, open approach, all this sort of thing. I've had to do this many, many times in nursing. I can't tell you how many times I've had to do this. But the most important thing that I ever learnt was stick to the facts that are directly related to the situation. You can't be saying you did this last time. You've just got to nail it down to this situation. So this is, I guess in today's society, there probably is a little bit more training and stuff that goes on just even in mainstream media, and also in workplaces to deal with this sort of thing. I call it anger management and things like that. But we're sort of looking at it from the viewpoint of our service to Hashem. So, and a lot of it still applies. There's a lot that crosses over the line, but it is important that we have that controlled, diffusing type of approach to it. Now, I was going to use an example of anger, like I had a couple of good examples. Like this, the usual one, you know, you have a customer that comes in and they're ranting and raving and hear them before they get out of the car. And, you know, people can fall into that trap that are at the brunt of that sort of anger, and you've got to defuse it. It's no good trying to tell the person not to be angry because they already are, you know. You've just got to say, you know, talk quieter and slower and, you know, iron out the problem. Oh, like a penny for every time I've had to do that. I don't think I have any buttons left that anyone can push when it comes to anger anymore. I've had them pushed out for years. But anyway, just that calm and controlness, you know. And some people do it very well by nature. They just do it well. So let's get back to looking at what do we do in this finding our ideal path and correcting what needs to be corrected. Well, again, we come back to a controlled focus on contemplating that situation, that inner self, that that spirit within us. And I think one of the most important things that we have to concentrate on is praying regularly, because often when we're in a turmoil, be it a you know, physical health or spiritual turmoil, or it can be family matters or whatever, we're often so consumed with those things that we forget the most important thing, which is to sort of pour our heart out to Hashem. And so, you know, my family say, don't ask grandma for advice, she'll tell you to pray. You know, well, it's the best place to start, you know. So why does God, what does God want me to overcome? What are the things I need to fix? What does he want from me? You know, if we're not sure, what I've got to contemplate and think about this. What is my service to God? Am I doing it? How do I improve my service to God? And so you're on that path of correcting yourself towards that sort of moderate pathway, you know, in everything we do. And they say, I mean, it doesn't matter who gives this advice, whether it be medical professionals or whether it be lifestyle coaches or whatever, but they say when we correct or fix that self that bothers us, then that begins that process, which is actually equal to wisdom and piety. Well, they don't call it piety, but, you know, wisdom and knowledge and understanding. But in our case, it's wisdom and piety. So, but sometimes we kind of know all these things, but it's not until we hear them voiced by someone else or tease everything apart that the impact actually comes upon us, I guess, you know. That I better get on a bit here because we've got quite a bit to get through tonight. So this here is quite interesting. So it asks the question, keep up with my notes now. It asks the questions, who is a Hasid or a pious one? And it may seem a simple thing to answer, but all the great sages and Hasidic people that we've known in our life, pious people, they'll all tell you that they have their struggles at times. It's not a perfectly smooth satin path all the time. It's something we have to be onto, but it's what we do in the majority of the situations that counts, that we keep a measured control over what we do and how we do it. So if you're on that pathway and you've got your head around it, then you're almost self-compelled to walk that moderate walk, talk that moderate talk. And if we go beyond that, then what that's called is that we're going beyond the measures of the 7 divine commandments, which isn't to confuse us. It just means that we're taking some extra precautions rather than just what is the moderate, as in terms of if we're too angry, then we've got to try and desensitise ourselves a bit and just head down that lower minimal scale till we get everything back in place. Oh, I'm going to sneeze, sorry. So going beyond the 7 divine commandments is in itself a measure of being on that road to being a pious person. And when you're on that road or that path of God's service, there's things that we have to watch out for, and that is that the righteousness and behaviour and character that God is praised in the Holy Scriptures for. And these are the ideal things that we are looking to emulate in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day characteristics and behaviour and associations. So we're looking at those things that we know, but we need to tell ourselves that is to be gracious, that saying, grace under fire, dignity in distress, to be merciful. Think of those that are in a less fortunate position than we are. We should be have kindness in abundance, and things like the sick and the poor and the disadvantaged, and things like being slow to anger and very quick to forgive. And that's a big thing. A lot of people find forgiveness really hard, and for good reasons, because they've had something awful happen in their life. And I often think when you see these parents who have had a child murdered, or a child killed in a car accident by a drunk driver or something like that, and my heart just stops when you hear how gracious. They're saddened and they're deeply that deep grieving, but they can say, look, I forgive the person who did this. I'm not happy about it, but I'm able to forgive that person. Are you okay? Yeah. Do you have another nosebleed?
Yeah, but I think it's only because I'm blowing my nose with the dust and the heat. Yeah.
Right in. Sorry about that. Grandson's had Listen, Thomas, you can go outside too if you keep that up. So, yes, these people that can, in amongst their grief and their suffering and their anguish, they can still go down deep in their heart and be forgiving. I think it's just such a blessed ability to be able to do that. And some people can and others can't. So we're looking at emulating how God is described in our Holy Scriptures. So the kindness, the forgiving, being slow to anger, and also there's a bit of homework. Abraham taught his descendants, and that is in Genesis chapter 18, verse 19, and that's for homework. And this is what God wants from us. This is actually it, and I guess in a very fine nutshell. So I just decided I rarely give homework. I decided tonight I would. And if it's not done, Stephen, you'll have to go into the naughty corner next week, all right? So we're going to now be up to a little bit. There's a couple of things I want to actually read out of this book because I would have only been paraphrasing it to do a slide on it. And I know some people have a copy of the Seven Gates of Righteous Knowledge. So, but we're at this point in time now where we're saying we're healing the soul from unhealthy traits. So what is the cure for the morally ill? Well, let's go to the scriptures for that prescription. And I've listed them here, but I'm not going to go through and read each of those. That is something you can all do later on, but it's obviously aimed at the theme of this class. And there's some also some areas in the book, The Gates of Righteous Knowledge, that I'm going to spend a bit of time with now. So the answers are always in the scripture. So without further ado, I just want to read. I've put references to what I'm reading here for those of you who have a copy of the book. And it's the Seven Gates of Righteous Knowledge, and it begins on page 96, and it actually goes through to page 98, but there's two sections of it. And also there's a footnote, and there's page for page 96. But anyway, it starts by giving the quotes, the biblical quotes, Isaiah and Proverbs. And there's a footnote 192 that says, by wise people, the healers of souls, Maimonides was referring to the Jewish sages who have wisdom to help and cure others. It is clear that in practical terms, the teaching cited here applies to any wise person who understands and practices the correct traits for upright people and the proper ways to correct and cure those who have unhealthy character traits. And this practice of consulting the rabbi or the sages in times gone by was quite common, and they would say, look, it may be a problem with this or with that, so correct that or correct this, and this may cure you. And so I think over the years and over the hundreds of years, we've probably lost some of those abilities to understand the impact of that, although it's probably will do a full circle. So now I'm just going up to the top of page 97. The first two paragraphs I want to read in relation to this. A person who is full of pride should cause himself to experience much disgrace. He should sit in a lowly place, dress in worn-out clothes that shame the wearer, and the like, until the arrogance is uprooted from his heart and he returns to the middle path, which is the proper path. When he returns to this middle path, he should follow it for the rest of his life. Extreme, but works. One should take a similar course with any other bad traits that he has. A person who's swayed in the direction of one of the extremes should move in the direction of the opposite extreme and accustom himself to that for a very long time until he has returned to the proper path, which is actually the midpoint for each and every temperament. Nevertheless, this is where we come to this taking another look at arrogance and anger. When we talk about the midpoint, here's a couple of exceptions. Nevertheless, there are a few particular temperaments for which Torah teaches that a person is forbidden to follow the middle path. He should move away from one extreme and adopt the other. Among those are arrogance and anger, the most harmful traits to a person's soul. They separate a person from God and from other people. How true is this? And as it says, God abominates all those who are haughty. Therefore, the sages declare whoever is arrogant is as if he denied God's presence. As it is stated, and your heart will be haughty and you will forget God, your Lord. So I guess we can all sort of relate to some situation where something overtakes our mind, and be it arrogance or anger, or could even be something else. And we have this shift. We become sort of beholding to this, and it moves us away from what our purpose is. And I guess sometimes it's only for a short space of time, and other times it consumes people. Early sages said anyone who becomes angry is like one who worships idols. They also said whenever one becomes angry, if he is a wise man, his wisdom leaves him. If he is a prophet, his prophecy leaves him. And they also said as well, the life of the irate is not true life. Therefore, they have directed that one should distance himself from anger and accustom himself not to feel any angry reactions, even to things which naturally provoke anger. This is a good path. This is the way of the righteous. They accept this humiliation, but do not humiliate others. They listen when they are shamed, but they do not answer. They do this with love and accept their suffering with joy, for this comes from God. So that, I had to read that because I thought I'm not going to be able to, it's all important, and it all bears thinking about, really. So here we know that this causes separation from God. Probably our own experience tells us that these moments or these behaviours have caused separation from the people that we shouldn't be separated from. So, let's go on to the next slide. So we're going to talk about speech now, which we've talked about earlier, and especially how speech is such a powerful thing. And I think I said in the previous lesson that, you know, once those words spill out through your lips, you can't gather them up and take them back. So it's so important that we do guard our speech, how we speak to people. You know, we've been told for years how we speak to our children will influence how they behave or not behave. So we have this tremendous gift, and we need to be mindful of using it for the right purposes. Rabbi Akiva said that silence is a safeguard for wisdom. There's an old saying that my mother always used: it is better to remain silent and appear foolish than to speak and remove all doubt. We've probably all heard that. And then the sage Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, I did not find anything better for one's person than silence, and whoever engages in excessive talk brings on sin. Very wise, very wise. So really what we come to understand is that our speech, what comes out of our mouth, in other words, is usually a reflection of what's within our heart. And hopefully if we're in a good mind space and we're on that middle path, that the words are appropriate that come out according to the situation or whatever it is we're dealing with. So if we have a correct spirit, it tells us that, and a pure heart, then we're without deception or trickery. It's a pure speech from a pure heart. So, and my father used to always say, you know, when you went to do business with somebody, if you'd not met them before, you could usually tell by the way they greeted you, you know, if they jumped up from their chair and walked towards you straight forward and shook your hand firmly, and, you know, or the fella that, you know, I'll make you wait 5 seconds and things like this. That, you know, you don't think about those things, do you? But I guess it's true. When you're older and wiser, you do pick up on those little things. And Dad always said that was a good indication of, a bit of an indication of the manner of the man, if you hadn't met him before. So I've just got to be careful that I don't. I think one of the things that we really need to remind ourselves that no matter what our situation is in life, and sometimes it's not always ideal, but we're to be happy and satisfied with that situation, because there is a reason for it. There's the divine providence. We come back and understand about that. But be happy in our situation. That one does not need a multitude of personal items or a huge big bank account or a palatial home. Those things don't necessarily make the heart pure and the speech appropriate, or make our life happy or healthy. So whatever we're allotted in life, we won't go any further until we learn to appreciate it and be grateful for it, even the hardships, and that wishing for something else is not going to help you appreciate where you are now. And if we don't appreciate where we are now, we won't appreciate where we are later either. We'll always be that looking back, or not quite. I wish, you know, if only, things like this. Now, this seems to be jumping the subject a little bit, but it's not. It says that one of the important things for Noahides to understand, and I've read this somewhere else too, is that we're not to abstain from things that are permitted by the Torah for Noahides. And it gives some examples here. And one of them is about making vows and oaths or abstaining from permitted work. And that leads into, for example, observing the Sabbath as the Jews are commanded. We're not to do that. The Sabbath is for the Jews. While we can appreciate it in other ways, studying Torah and having a nice meal if we're lucky enough to have family and friends around, going for a walk in. There's lots of things we can do, but if we're rostered to work that day, we work. We don't say, oh, I can't work, it's the Sabbath, you know. So we have to deal with each day as it comes. And this is something, this next one, fasting on Yom, I put Tom Kippur. Dear oh me. Fasting on Yom Kippur. It was only this last Yom Kippur that passed that I heard 2 Noahides talking about this. They're going to fast. Well, we're not supposed to. We can fast if it's for our health, or we've got some reason to, I don't know, diet or whatever, something like that. But fasting on Yom Kippur and taking part in Yom Kippur as Jews do is not for us. So what is commanded to the Jews is for the Jews, and what's commanded to the Gentiles, that is for the rest of the world, for the rest of mankind. So we need to take care that we're not making a new religion or adding a commandment or subtracting a commandment for that matter. And look, in the past, there's been some Noahides and some groups that have come dangerously close to this, or they've already crossed over. So we need to exercise extreme care to avoid these sorts of transgressions. And there is a reference in the Divine Code by Rabbi Moshe Weiner. I quoted the page number in the 4th edition. It's on page 57 if anyone wants to refer to that. But it does come under the dangers of the subheading of not to make a new religion. So that just needed to be, that was included in this. All right. Okay. On the mark and watch the clock here. Rightio. Right. We're getting towards the end now. Now, this is a bit interesting here. It's got a wind problem here blowing. I had to put the fan on. It's really muggy up here tonight. Guarding oneself from sin, this business of going beyond the measure of the law. Now, it seems that we've just given ourselves a lecture about not going overboard and extreme, and now we're saying, you know, we've got to guard ourselves, put some barriers up, but this is in a different light. And this is very interesting, and it's actually incredible that I'm doing this lesson this week, because I've actually been through an experience with a family, and which has some bearing on this topic. So guarding oneself from sin. So we do have to, it says that we should fence the Torah. The Torah should be our safety fence. So there are times when we do need to put extra precautions in place, like boundaries and safeguards, and to see that, or to ensure that we don't stray, that we don't get tempted. And there, in certain areas, it really is prudent to be cautious, even if we are always sticking close to that righteous middle path. So we are entitled to add some extra precautionary measures. That is perfectly okay, particularly if it's to guard against temptation or entrapment. Example, business dealings or forbidden relationships. So while the Torah does not prohibit Gentiles from seclusion with the opposite gender, however, the Divine Code does talk, and I've used a reference down there of where it can be found, incidentally. The Divine Code, 4th edition, page 457, starts quite extensively talking about this exact extra precautions, putting a gate around things, reducing the risk of trips and slips, so to speak. So while the Torah law doesn't prohibit Gentiles from seclusion, however, in today's society, I've added this bit, it would be sensible to exercise some measures to ensure dignity and respect towards both genders. Now, I want to pause for a moment here. In today's society, it isn't like when I was growing up as a young person where morals were, you know, people did exercise some morals. I know, you know, some people didn't, but the general rule was that people were honest, people did behave themselves, people didn't take advantage of other people or situations. But today we can't assume that. While there are certainly some good behaviour still in place, etc. But I just want to give an example. A young man today is leaving himself wide open to accusations and entrapment by being alone with a young woman, unsupervised, and this is something that has happened just recently. And it grieves me to even say this, and I don't know if I even should, but once upon a time it was all about protecting the females from the males, and I don't detract from that one bit. But nowadays, young men are just as vulnerable to what they call entrapment and they need to be very aware of it because it can end up being a dreadful, dreadful situation. I had 3 sons. I was very lucky. My husband backed me up on this. We gave them, I didn't have daughters, we gave them quite specific instructions on what was expected of them. And one of the things we always said was never be alone with a female that you don't know, or there's not a group of, you know, just don't put yourself in that situation. And it's not the right thing to do because you may be very honest and not take advantage of her, but who's to say if things don't go her way, she can, you know, and the same can be said for the males. So I think in this day and age, boys need to be just as careful. And I've also, my sons have told their sons that as well. And there are some very forceful young women out there who don't show a lot of restraint. And I think there are some young men that can be, there's no other word for it, entrapped. And it's only one person's word against the other. So that is why we say best to put measures in place. It was easy for me because my boys sort of listened to me and we lived on a farm. And I understand that not everyone can have it as easy because they live in town. Kids all go out and mix and play and go out with their friends and neighbours and things like that. But there's safety in numbers. There's safety in numbers. You know, just this last weekend, my granddaughter came up with one of her friends and they went to an event where there was lots of men and women there, but my youngest grandson, who is her brother, he was the man of the house. He looked after the 2 girls and they had a motel room because they were a fair way away. He looked after them. You know, that's one thing. He was with his sister and her friend and they all looked after each other. But I just think when one's alone with another, so many things can happen, particularly to young people. Now, I know I've spent a lot of time on that, but it's just something that was pretty raw in my mind this week about how innocently things can go wrong. So, I mean, you've got a son, haven't you, Stephen? Yeah, they're wonderful, aren't they? You know, I think some of the young men today are more sensible than the young girls. But anyway, I'm not an expert in that area. So that is why I spent a bit of time talking about safeguarding oneself. And as I said, that was a situation that was close in my mind this week about it. So it's sad that we have to say that. And this is where you wonder when you hear some of these celebrities and sports stars that get caught up in some of these situations, you're left with, well, who's telling the truth? I mean, the same with them. I know my grandson, you know, he says a girl comes knocking on my door with a bottle of wine in her hand, she doesn't cross that threshold, you know. And I mean, it's door shut in your face. So I think that men have got to take some responsibility at the risk of sounding rude at times and saying, no way, no. Doesn't, you know, you don't come any further, you don't cross that threshold or what have you. You've got to put up barriers around yourself. But anyway, I've spoken enough about that and tied up enough time. Any questions, Stephen? Anything I haven't covered or?
Okay, did you want to stop the recording on the?
Oh, yes, I can. Yes, I can do that. So we will end it. And don't forget homework for those of you who are watching this recording. And I will see you all next week with another topic.